Hermod stood in the great hall of Asgard, surrounded by the gods, sadness and despair hanging in the air like a heavy fog. The news of Baldur's death, the god of light, had spread like fire on dry straw. He felt his heart tighten, an unbearable weight in his chest. The faces of the gods, once radiant, were now somber, reflecting the pain of loss. "We need to do something," he exclaimed, his voice firm despite the anguish consuming him. "I will go to Helheim and bring Baldur back." "You don't know what awaits you there," Odin, his father, warned with a look of concern. "Hel is not kind to those who dare challenge her. Baldur's death is not a mere accident. There are forces at play that you cannot comprehend, but I can't just stand here with my arms crossed while my brother is trapped in the realm of the dead." Hermod replied, his determination growing. "I am his brother, and I will not give up on him." The gods exchanged glances, some expressing approval, others uncertainty. Freyja, the goddess of beauty and love, approached Hermod and placed her hand on his shoulder. "If you truly wish to do this, we will support you. But you must be prepared for what you will face." With one last look at the gods, Hermod said his goodbyes. He walked to the stables where Sleipnir, the magnificent eight-legged horse, awaited him. As he mounted, he felt the strength of the animal beneath him, a sensation of hope mingled with anxiety. "Come on, Sleipnir. We need to hurry. Baldur's fate depends on us," the horse neighed, as if understanding the gravity of the mission. With a powerful whinny, Sleipnir took off toward the Jallar Bridge, which led to the dark realm of Helheim. The biting wind blew against his face, but Hermod felt no cold. His determination was his shield. As he crossed the bridge, he saw the shadows gathering ahead, a foreboding sign of what was to come. He knew Hel, the ruler of the underworld, awaited him. His heart raced as he prepared to face his destiny, determined to rescue Baldur no matter the cost. "For you, brother," he murmured, launching himself into the abyss of the unknown, his words echoing in his mind. Hermod returned to the world of the living, his heart heavy with the sadness surrounding Baldur's death. He summoned all the gods, humans, and mythological creatures to an assembly in the clearing of Asgard, where the atmosphere was thick with grief. The murmurs of anguished voices filled the air as everyone prepared to mourn the beloved god of light. With a firm voice, Hermod addressed the crowd. "Friends, brothers, and sisters, we must weep for Baldur, for only then can we bring him back. If we all unite in lament, Hel will open the gates of Helheim, and he may return to us." Tears began to well in the eyes of those present, a collective lament at the realm. The birds stopped singing, and even the winds seemed to mourn, carrying with them the laments of a world in sorrow. Suddenly, a shadow emerged in the distance, watching the scene with a satisfied smile. Lurni, disguised as the giantess Thok, lurked from a corner, his heart pulsating with pleasure at others' misfortune. "Why weep for a god who brought us so much suffering?" Lurni murmured to himself, his voice laced with disdain. "Life is a cycle of tragedies, and death is merely a part of it. Why mourn the inevitable?" As everyone united in tears, Lurni approached the assembly, his imposing form and intimidating presence bring attention. He lifted his head, staring at Hermod with a challenging gaze. "I, Thok, do not weep for Baldur. He was nothing more than a blinding light, and his death is merely a reflection of life's fragility." Lurni's words cut through the air like a sharp blade. Hermod, with hope crumbling in his chest, looked at the disguised god of trickery and exclaimed, "Why do you refuse to feel the pain of others? Your selfishness may cost my brother his life, and what does it matter?" Lurni replied, a sarcastic smile dancing on his lips. "Tragedies are inevitable, and life goes on. The world is a stage, and we are all mere actors. Why weep for a scene that has already played out?" With Lurni's refusal echoing in the clearing, Hermod's hope faded like a dream at dawn. The lament of the gods intensified, but a shadow loomed over them, a shadow that could seal Baldur's fate forever. Hermod walked toward the Hall of the Gods with a heavy heart. The tragedy of Baldur's death still pulsed in his mind, but now the pain had sharpened with the revelation of what truly occurred in Helheim. He entered the great hall, where the gods were gathered, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. All eyes turned to him, waiting for his words. "My brother remains in Helheim," said Hermod, his voice trembling. Lurni refused to weep for Baldur. "Without the lament of all living beings, he cannot return." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the hall. "If we don't do something now, my brother's fate will be sealed forever." The gods agreed, and soon the cave where Lurni was hiding was surrounded. The darkness of the cave was oppressive, and the light from the torches barely illuminated the damp, cold walls. Lurni, who had until then concealed himself in his true form, sensed the presence of the gods and smiled a cunning and defiant smile. "You cannot imprison me," he mocked, his eyes glinting with malice. I will always be more cunning than you. Let's see about that. Lerni, replied Odin, his voice low and controlled. You won't have anywhere to run tonight. The gods advanced, encircling Lerni, who tried to evade them using his tricks, but their collective strength was relentless. In an instant, Lerni was immobilized, and magical ropes forged by the dwarves bound him tightly. The fury and determination of the gods were palpable, and they celebrated the capture of the god of trickery. Laughing amidst the tension, Lerni taunted, You think this will stop me? I am a god. This is not how my story ends. But the gods, firm and resolute, knew that the real battle had only just begun. The echo of Lerni's screams resonated within the dark cave, while Skadi, the imposing giantess, watched with a look of satisfaction. The venomous serpent, with its gleaming scales, writhed above Lerni's head, who thrashed in agony. Each drop of venom that fell upon his face was torture, and his pain was palpable. You brought this upon yourself, Lerni, Skadi declared, her deep voice reverberating off the cave walls. It is only fair that you feel the consequences of your betrayals. Lerni, between screams and groans, managed to respond. I am not the only guilty one. You all have your shadows, your lies. He tried, in vain, to divert attention from his suffering, but the pain was too intense for any rhetoric. At that moment, Sigyn, Lerni's loyal wife, appeared, her determined expression contrasting with the despair that filled the cave. She held a basin, ready to collect the venom that dripped incessantly. Skadi, stop this. He is my husband, my love. This is not justice. Sigyn's words were a cry, a plea that reflected her unwavering loyalty. You defend a traitor, Skadi replied, disdainful. His pain is just the beginning of what he deserves. Sigyn ignored the provocation and positioned herself beneath the serpent, skillfully collecting the venomous drops. I will not let you suffer like this, she declared as she emptied the basin, momentarily alleviating Lerni's pain. But the basin filled quickly, and Sigyn had to empty it frequently. With each interval, a few drops of venom slipped down Lerni's face, provoking convulsions of pain. Sigyn, please, he implored, his desolate gaze reflecting the intensity of his anguish. Why do you do this for me? Because I love you, she replied, tears streaming down her face. And as long as there is a drop of hope, I will fight for you. Once more, she emptied the basin, but the venom did not stop. Lerni, between screams and whispers, began to feel the shadow of guilt closing in, but the pain was a constant reminder of his action. If I could turn back time, he murmured, a haunting echo of regret in his voice. But the words were lost in the air as the torture continued. The cave, a silent witness to that drama, seemed to absorb the pain and loss, as if the very space were condemned to bear the weight of Lerni's betrayal. And thus, the struggle between love and pain unfolded, with Sigyn determined to save the man who was also her tormentor, and Lerni caught between his choices and the desire for redemption he had yet to comprehend. As the serpent continued to drip venom upon Lerni, he found himself in a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The pulsing pain in his body, causing him to writhe and scream, could not compare to the dilemma tormenting his mind. He reflected on his actions, every choice that had led him to this lamentable state. The weight of his betrayal of Balder oppressed Lerni, and even amidst his suffering, a thread of regret began to weave itself into his hardened heart. Why did I do this? Lerni murmured to himself, his voice barely audible, suffocated by the echoes of his own lamentation. If only I could go back. Sigyn, hearing his murmur, paused for a moment and looked into her husband's eyes, which now revealed a glimmer of vulnerability. Lerni, I still believe in you. I've always believed, she said softly, as she emptied the basin already filled with venom. You can redeem yourself. Please, don't give up on us. Redemption, for a traitor like me, Lerni replied, his voice heavy with bitterness. What I did cannot be undone. Balder, I lost him. And by the gods, that is punishment enough. Sigyn felt a deep pain at her beloved's words. You can change, Lerni. You are not just the god of trickery. You are more than that to me. With tears in her eyes, she silently vowed that she would never stop fighting for him, even if it meant facing the gods and their wrath. Meanwhile, in a cave not far away, the gods gathered to discuss Lerni's fate. Odin, with his wisdom and penetrating gaze, questioned the validity of the punishment imposed. Eternal suffering for a being who has already brought so much misfortune into the world. Is that truly sufficient? Thor, his son, with indignation etched on his face, responded, he must pay for his action. We cannot allow his betrayal to go unpunished. The discussion heated up among the gods, each presenting their argument, but the final decision still hung in the air like thunder waiting to unleash a storm. Even in his state of pain, Loki felt the weight of the god's judgment upon his shoulders, and the uncertainty of his future began to blend with a new spark of hope, though still shrouded in shadows. The storm roared in the sky, and lightning illuminated the cave where Loki was trapped. Sigyn, with the basin in her hands, desperately tried to contain the venom dripping from the serpent. Each drop that fell on Loki felt like a dagger piercing his flesh, but her determination was unwavering. The love she felt for her husband propelled her to face any pain. However, that night, an unexpected presence filled the heavy air of the cave. A hooded figure appeared, its indistinct contours dancing in the light of the storm. Sigyn, initially frightened, recognized the dark aura of hell. The ruler of the underworld watched her with a penetrating gaze, her enigmatic smile revealing a deep knowledge of the secrets surrounding Loki's fate. Sigyn, Hell said, her voice sounding like a whisper amidst the thunder, I bring an offer that could change everything. If you can make Loki truly cry for his action, I will consider freeing him. Sigyn hesitated, the weight of Hell's words echoing in her mind. She looked at Loki, who was lost in his pain and suffering. Loki, the chance for freedom is before us. You need to find your remorse, she exclaimed, her voice trembling between hope and despair. Loki, with his eyes fixed on the ground, felt a wave of emotions flooding through him. The memories of the lives he had destroyed, the smiles he had erased, began to surface in his mind. I didn't know, he murmured, his voice choked. I didn't realize how far my betrayal could reach. With tears streaming down his face, Loki finally looked at Sigyn. I am so sorry, my love. I am sorry for everything I did. And in a moment of vulnerability, the tears began to flow freely. The radiant light surrounding Loki began to shine intensely, illuminating the cave and blinding the darkness that enveloped him. The gods, watching from a distance, were astonished by Loki's transformation. The anger that had once dominated his heart began to dissipate. He was no longer the cunning traitor, but a being seeking redemption. And so, as he cried sincerely, Loki was freed from his chains, but not without a price. You now commit to protecting Balder and all living beings, Hel declared, her voice firm. Thus becoming a guardian of light and hope, Loki nodded, the weight of his new responsibility resting heavily on his shoulders. With one last look at Sigyn, who smiled through tears of joy and relief, he realized that his journey of redemption was just beginning. The traitor had become a symbol of hope, and the tragedy of Balder finally found its path to resolution.